Well, the Israeli military says Iran has launched a new wave of missiles towards Israel. This comes after the Israeli military carried out another round of airstrikes against targets throughout Iran, including one on the country's state broadcaster. The violence has killed at least 224 people in Iran since hostilities erupted 4 days ago. Israel has reported 24 deaths.
Iranian state television comes under attack. These images shared on the social media platform X show the building burning. Earlier, Israel called on Iranians to evacuate this area of the Iranian capital, home to hospitals and the state broadcaster. The station later resumed broadcasting. Iranians elsewhere have been sharing footage of Israeli strikes. This footage shared on X appears to show an Israeli strike on a neighborhood in the capital. A building completely collapsed. This video shows a strike on a site in the city of Isfahan in central Iran. This footage by Iranian Red Crescent Society claims to show a hospital ward damaged by an Israeli strike. The humanitarian organization says the strike targeted the Farabi hospital in the city of Kermanshah. According to Iranian media, several patients in different wards were injured in the Monday morning attack. Some Iranians have been fleeing to neighboring Turkey following the attacks.
I'm here because of safety. They're bombing. My children have small children of their own. I have grandchildren. They live in Tehran. I'm waiting for them so that we can enter Turkey together.
Some Iranian tourists were seen going back to Iran.
We are not afraid of death. Our guide is Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and we would sacrifice our lives for him. We could never forego our nation, our religion or faith. We are not afraid to die. We will stand against Israel until our last breath, and for as long as our lives allow.
In Tehran, many residents have decided to stay.
We are not going anywhere. If anyone has to leave, it's the Israelis who should abandon their own country and go.
No way. We're staying. Where would we go? Evacuate Tehran? How could we do that? Well, some people might have a lot of savings or be in a good financial situation. Maybe they can leave. But us personally, I don't think we're going anywhere.
As the bombardment continues, with no signs of de-escalation, many Iranians are bracing for a longer conflict.
Let's take a closer look at all of this and bring in Iran expert Ali Fatollah-Nejad. He's the director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order. He's also the author of the book Iran in an Emerging New World Order, From Ahmadinejad to Rouhani. He joins us tonight from Berlin. Good to have you back on the show. Now, the Israeli president says his country's operation is aimed at changing the reality in the Middle East. In your opinion, is that an attainable goal?
Well, first of all, the reality in the Middle East has been very much changed since last year with the unraveling of the Iran-led axis of resistance. And what now, since a few days now, the Israelis have basically also achieved is to considerably, if not significantly, weaken the Islamic Republic of Iran, militarily for sure, and also with various strikes, also on the nuclear facilities. So I'm not sure how realistic this end goal is if you link it to the current military conflict. So if this is a realistic end game scenario, as long as this military confrontation in its current dimension continues, there will be more suffering, especially when we see what is happening in Tehran.
Benjamin Netanyahu said that killing Iran's supreme leader would, quote, end the conflict. Do you share that assessment?
Well, if Iran's supreme leader is indeed killed, this would be a major turning point indeed, because this would symbolize and reflect the end of the regime as we know it. So this would also open up a new window of opportunity. So this is for sure. According to the reports that we've seen over the last 24 hours or a bit more, is that US President Trump has de facto vetoed any Israeli plans to assassinate Khamenei. And I'm sure the Israelis know where he is. And this American veto stands as long as it seems Iran does not target US soldiers or interests in the region. So if this latter aspect would change in the future, we may see such a scenario. But then again, Israel, because of its preponderance, has the ability to kill Khamenei.
Israel claims that regime change in Iran is not actually the primary objective of this operation. But Benjamin Netanyahu, addressing the Iranian people directly over the weekend, said Israel was clearing the path to freedom for them. What exactly do you think he means by that? And how do Iranians feel about statements like this?
Well, this kind of statement is which Netanyahu has engaged in for many years now, is within this war currently colliding with reality. How can you imagine regime change in the wake of a popular uprising against the Islamic Republic that is detested by the clear majority of Iranians, when at the same time there are bombs raining on Tehran? After all, this kind of mass uprising should happen in this capital city of Tehran. So this is the political center. This is the, on all conceivable levels, this is the center of Iran. So this is kind of colluding with reality, the current Israeli, strategy that is also very much focused on Tehran.
The U.S. president wrote on social media yesterday, I believe it was, that the fighting would be easy to stop. Realistically, what would it take?
It would take pressure primarily from the United States and perhaps by extension by the G7 states on the two warring parties to engage in a cessation of hostilities that would allow for the resumption of diplomacy between the United States in Iran that would result in Tehran accepting the total dismantlement of its nuclear program. So this is one of the obvious ways of ending, the war, something that also the Arab Gulf states are obviously pushing for. So, so a temporary ceasefire would allow for the resumption of talks and would also put pressure on the Islamic Republic to accept such a scenario of dismantlement of its nuclear program.
That was Iran expert Ali Fatollah-Nejad. Thank you so much. Great speaking to you today.
Thank you.
Well, a short while ago, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel's military now had control of the skies over Tehran. Netanyahu added that Israel's armed forces were well on their way to achieving their main war goals.
The Israeli Air Force controls the skies of Tehran. This is a change in the entire campaign. We are on our way to achieving our two goals, eliminating the nuclear threat and eliminating the missile threat. When we control the skies of Tehran, we are hitting these targets, the targets of the regime.
DW's Emily Gordine is following the situation from Tel Aviv in Israel.
That's right. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, essentially struck the broadcasting headquarters of Iranian state television. A video emerged of the presenter fleeing essentially a loud bang and smoke billowing around her. Now, the IDF says that it struck the headquarters because it says it was used for military activity. It didn't specify what kind of military activity. But a few hours ago, the IDF did issue statements ordering people to evacuate from the area in Tehran. Now, this comes as Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, earlier said that if Iran didn't stop attacking Israel, the people of Tehran would have to pay a price for that. Of course, the question, it begs the question of where is all of this going? What is the end goal here of the Israelis with this military campaign, which started on Friday, with Israel attacking nuclear facilities, high-ranking military commanders, but also leading nuclear scientists in a bid essentially to weaken Iran's nuclear capabilities. And the Israeli army does say that it was able to significantly damage Iran's nuclear facilities, which it sees as a threat to Israel's existence. But Rafael Grossi, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, says that, in fact, the nuclear facilities were only damaged to a very small degree. There was limited damage because the strikes that Israel launched essentially only reached the facilities that were above the ground and not below the ground. And so we're seeing now Israel going after sort of secondary military targets, also critical infrastructure. And the question is just, what is the strategic end goal? What kind of political solution does Israel envision? And when is this conflict going to stop?
Air raid sirens went off a short while ago in Tel Aviv. You actually had to rush to take shelter. Tell us more about how this escalation is impacting civilians there.
Well, the streets of Tel Aviv are eerily quiet. People are very aware. They're on high alert. They keep checking their phones to see any orders to go and seek shelter. Many have spent their nights in shelters. During the day, schools obviously shut. Most non-essential shops are closed. Flights have been stopped as well. Many Israelis are essentially stranded abroad. But that being said, also, I need to mention here as well, hospitals have moved their operations underground. So it's sort of a state-level readiness for any next strike from the Iranians. But that being said, and despite the destruction that you can see from the missiles that have hit across Israel, there is still strong political support for the Israeli government's decision to attack Iran. Many Israelis do not want to be surprised again, as they were on October 7th, 2023, when they were attacked by Hamas, when over 1,200 Israelis were killed and 250 taken hostage. And people do feel, and that has been the case for many, many years, decades even, that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel, especially with its nuclear capabilities that it has been building up over the years. The question is just how steadfast will this support remain, as the cost to Israel in terms of the civilian cost, but also the economic cost. Military officials estimate that it costs Israel approximately $1 billion a day to keep the war with Iran going. Whether that will do anything to this support for Israel's action.
That was DW's Emily Gordine in Tel Aviv. Many thanks for that update, and please make sure to stay safe. Assaf Orion is the former head of strategic planning in the Israel Defense Forces. He's currently a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel and an international fellow at the Washington Institute in the U.S. Welcome to DW. Now, we're 4 days into this latest confrontation. Do you think it's going how Israel planned?
So far, it seems that Israel is executing what it has planned, yes.
Israel has attacked the nuclear programs of its neighbors, namely Iraq and Syria, before. How is this operation different?
Both Iraq in 1981 and Syria in 2007 were one target project with a plutogenic reactor to be taken out, and it was enough to hit it once, each of them, to take the program, off rails and remove the problem.
Does Israel have the capabilities? Do you think, does Israel at this point in time have the capabilities to destroy Iran's nuclear program?
Iran's nuclear program can be set back seriously by Israel's attack. And since it's a regenerating national project, it will surely be reignited later, and it will be needed to be stopped diplomatically and maybe even militarily.
Do you think the current Israeli leadership is aware of that? Because it doesn't seem like a setback would be identified as a success from what we're hearing out of Israel right now.
Since the casus belli of this war is an announcement that Iran was having an active weapon program with which accelerated during the last year, and it needed to be stopped basically by killing the nuclear scientists leading this program. That's a first achievement to be made. The current leadership, mainly Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister, is well versed on Iran's nuclear. He's been dealing with that for decades. So I think awareness is not the question.
So is the point of this to delay or to destroy the program?
To destroy critical elements like enrichment, conversion, weapon, and so on, and to delay it long enough, since we expect Iran to go back to its efforts after the strike, and but to set it back long enough for the diplomatic efforts of the U.S. To make it into a permanent strategic achievement.
Do you believe Israel can pressure Iran hard enough to force it to agree to a nuclear deal on the United States terms?
I don't think that Israel is seeking to pressure Iran to agree. I think Israel is seeking to set the stage with a different level of Iranian capabilities to deprive Iran what it's been accumulating in violation of its international commitment, and to allow better conditions for the ongoing negotiations afterwards.
What would be a favorable outcome of these negotiations from the Israeli perspective?
I think we all need to look forward to a situation in which Iran cannot ever decide and achieve a nuclear weapon, and that includes enrichment capabilities.
We've talked about the U.S. quite a bit now. They are not directly involved in this confrontation at this point. Under what circumstances would you see that changing?
I would argue that America is not involved in offensive operations in that campaign, but it is involved from before day one on the political and diplomatic level. It was well aware of what Israel was planning to do, and it's also critically involved in defending Israel, mainly against Iran's drones and ballistic missiles attacks against Israel's population centers.
Do you expect Prime Minister Netanyahu to rely on the United States to end this conflict?
I think that the main reason for the parties to stop is their, I would say, simultaneous decision to end the fighting because of the cost they are paying. Israel will probably not do it before it achieves its goals. Iran would need to choose whether to follow what some of its leadership says that it wants to stop, and other parts of the leadership says that it will continue relentlessly even if Israel stops. America anyway will play an important role in terminating the fighting and bringing negotiation back on tracks.
How big a factor is regime change for Israel at this point?
I think a bit like what happened in Lebanon and Syria when Hezbollah was the goal, but the regime fall of Mr. Assad was a welcome development, but not a war goal. Again, I think Israel would welcome a regime change, but this is not a war objective to be achieved within the military campaign.
That was Assaf Orion. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
What these strikes mean for Iran. I'm joined now by Sarah Bazoobandi. She's a non-resident research fellow at the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on DW today. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is clearing the path to freedom for Iranians. How is that statement being viewed in Iran?
Well, obviously, Iranian society, like every society, is a mixture of different opinions. There are segments of the society, increasingly, evidently declining portion of the society that is still supportive and loyal to the establishment, to the state, to the Islamic Republic. But there has been an increasing segment of the society that is really has lost its trust and confidence in the state, in the establishment, in the state, and they want change. And they brought their grievances, they brought their demand to the streets. They staged various rounds of protests in previous years. Those segments, it's actually, these kind of narrative really resonates with them because. At least what I observe from my own personal conversations with acquaintances and network of contacts inside Iran and observations of the narrative that I see across social media, clubhouse rooms, in Twitter, in Instagram, you name it. I observe these on a daily basis, perhaps much longer than I should spend on social media to get a sense of the collective psyche of the Iranian society. What I observe is that people have perhaps reached the point that the regime is so brutal and really uses force, violence, crackdown every time that there is a protest, rather than implementing any reform or listening to the grievances and demands of the people. They just kill, imprison, torture, rape, you name it. Therefore, an external force like this might really resonate with the people.
How much appetite do you think Iran has for a longer conflict with Israel?
It's very hard to say because I don't have access to intelligence, how much military capability they have left, how much of it has been destructed by Israeli attacks. But of course, one important issue that Iran used to have and doesn't have anymore is its proxies. Of course, the Houthis can at points act as an Iranian proxy, but the crown jewel of the proxy groups was Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is now no longer capable of doing anything. So I think in the long run, perhaps is with the level of destruction that Israel and its allies are able to impose, it's not really going to work in favor of Iran, and Iran is not capable of getting into yet another 8 years of war, for example, that they had with Iraq.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, is openly talking now about killing Iran's supreme leader and how that would, quote, end the conflict. If Israel were really to kill Ali Khamenei, what could come next?
There are several scenarios. One of them is that, and people have predicted that, the establishment will use that as a form of changing skin, getting rid of the position of supreme leader, coming back to negotiation. The same elite will stay in power. They will cut a deal. They will try to normalize, and they'll carry on with the corrupt state capture practices that they had, but they will have a much more contained regional and foreign policy. I see that less likely. I think what we witnessed and what we have witnessed from the ideology, from the indoctrination, from the narrative, from the discourse, from the strategy, Islamic Republic is not ready and will not be ready to change. So maybe the eradication of the supreme leader will have a major impact on the regime, and it would lead to a quicker collapse of the Islamic Republic.
That was Sarah Bazoobandi from the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University. Thank you so much for all those insights. It was great speaking to you today.